Hey guys, welcome to the Powerful Man Show, where we help married businessmen save their marriages without having to talk about it, get unstuck, and gain clarity in their lives. As I like to say, life is too short for average. I'm your host, Doug Holt. Now let's get this started.
Welcome to part 3 in series of dealing with your childhood trauma. Now, by this point, you've obviously heard from a woman's perspective and how childhood trauma was showing up with her husband and how that was affecting their relationship. And you've also heard from a man's perspective as well, and how his childhood trauma was also influencing subconsciously his behavior as well, both with his kids and with his wife. And you heard him mention on the last episode that he realized a lot of his nice guy tendencies actually came from a lot of unresolved childhood trauma. But you also heard him say that he wasn't even aware that he had any childhood trauma, right? Because, and you heard also that from Mo as well when she was talking about her husband, because typically, logically, we think that childhood was great for me. Went on holidays, went had a season ticket for Leeds United. There's lots of different things. Leeds United is my favorite soccer team in the UK, by the way, football team. But point being is, logically, we can compare it, the childhood that is, to other people's childhoods who might have had it way worse than us, right? Therefore, we can often discount our own experience in favor of intellect and logic, and as a result, bury how we felt about it. Okay. And usually we then develop coping mechanisms within childhood. And, I was coaching somebody on the team yesterday when we're diving into this, and I said to him, how smart was it that you, as a young child, figured out what you had to do in order to get your needs met as a child, right? How smart was it, right? In order for you to figure out what you had to do in order to fit in, stay safe, loved, and protected. You came up with the strategy that served you really well. You chose to essentially wear a mask and be a musician and do other things because you knew that when you wore that mask, you got appreciation and admiration and significance that you wasn't getting at home. So you then felt a sense of belonging that you didn't always feel at home. And the thing is, as a young child, those strategies essentially are really smart and effective. However, it reaches a point in adulthood where those strategies start to work against us instead of for us. And this is where then we see triggers show up and we fall into deer mode and the five agonies and no man's land. And it's about becoming aware of the mask that you chose to wear and being able to take it off. Because essentially, you've heard us talk about narcissism quite a bit, or at least I have on the podcast over the past few months. In the most basic sense, narcissism is the denial of your feeling, essentially, the overinvestment in how you appear to people in favor of how you actually feel. And that's what can then lead to guys, really anyone in society. It's kind of a mass problem, but men in particular going out and looking for achievement and accolades, be it through homes, cars, watches, holidays, and post it on social media, also that they can portray a certain image, right? So on the outside, they look like they've got it all together, but on the inside, they kind of feel like it's falling apart. So anyway, what I'm going to do, if you're watching this on YouTube, then you'll see that I'm about to go through a slight training, and I'm going to introduce you to a concept called the fundamentals of alpha. Now, if you're listening to this, I'll walk through it as well so that you can visualize this in your own mind. Obviously, if you're driving, make sure you continue to pay attention to the road. But the fundamentals of alpha essentially is a framework that we haven't released to the public yet. I'm sharing it with you now. It does form part of the Alpha Ascension Matrix, which is an ascension model, essentially, that we've just released to the men in the Brotherhood that gives pathways for Alpha 1, 2, 3, 4. I won't dive into that much right now. I'm sure Doug and I will talk about that on another podcast. But this does feed into that. And also, this framework is something we've been using a lot with the guys in the inner circle and our one-on-one clients as well. So I'm going to dive in. So like I said, I'm just going to write the title across the top. So, the fundamentals of alpha. Now, if you've been listening for a while or you've been following us for any length of time, then you'll know that alpha, to the men in the movement, we define alpha as a quiet confidence. Okay. A quiet self assurance. You know what you need to do, you know what's best for your pack, you are comfortable with leading and making decisions, and you have a calming effect on the people around you. Essentially, the true alpha, in the way that we look at it, kind of like the alpha wolf in nature, nothing to hide, nothing to prove. If you ever look at the alpha wolf in nature, how he plays with his cubs, how he adores his alpha female and puts her on a pedestal and nurtures that feminine, and how he often leads the pack from the back. There's a lot of crossover here. So, in the fundamentals of alpha, I want you to imagine this like a triangle, kind of similar to the triad connection in some respects. So, at the base of the triangle, you've got peace. Okay. Now, peace is power. Whenever you have experienced the greatest moments of success in your life with the least amount of effort, it probably felt the easiest and the most effortless. It won't have come from a chaotic or busy mind. Okay. So the foundation of the fundamentals of alpha is peace. That sits along the bottom of the triangle. Now, on the left-hand side of the triangle is power. Okay. And on the right-hand side of the triangle is flow. Now, the way that this works is once you establish a foundation of peace, you then transition into power. And once you've established power and you're harnessing power using the four tenets of power, which I'll get to in a moment, you then can make your way into flow. You're into more of a flow within your life. I know people may define flow differently. The way that we define flow in this context is the ability to experience a lot more flow and ease and flexibility within your life. Not so much you can enter a flow state with this. I'm not particularly talking about flow state itself as it pertains to deep work for an hour and a half or so. And then once you experience flow, you obviously then get to experience more peace as well. And at that point, this then just starts to become a self-perpetuating cycle. Okay. It starts to just feed itself and you start to spiral around. Now, what makes up peace? So, in these three stages, I'll just write peace, power, and flow. Now, when you think of childhood trauma and you think about how that encourages, influences you to fall into deer, and how those triggers are then present and show up in your marriage, and you feel unappreciated by your partner. You feel a lack of connection, and maybe you withdraw and erupt, and all those kind of things that go with it. The first step within the fundamentals of alpha is peace, and within peace, you're going to go through 4 steps. The first step is to detach. The second step is release. The third step is remember. And then the fourth step is reinforce. Now, the mechanism that we use to help the men within the movement achieve peace very quickly is the alpha reset. That's why Mr. Doug Hall, Dougie Fresh, is not on the podcast with me right now. He is leading a group of men through the alpha reset in Vermont right now. Now, I'm not going to tell you too much about, obviously, the alpha reset and how this works, but essentially the outline of this is detach means becoming aware of the story that you have been telling yourself, the lies, essentially, that have been running your life subconsciously. They've been simmering beneath the surface and as a result have been causing you to fall into patterns of shame, sabotage, and sedation, right? These are often unconscious. You're not aware of these. Again, it's that mask that you formed early in childhood as a survival strategy. When you become an adult, instead of working for you, it works against you. So in detach, you have to become aware of the story. This is why one of the first exercises we take the men through within the activation method is the shadow stick man. Now, once you have detached, you can then begin to release. Now, the thing with release is we believe in the powerful man that whatever you think in your mind, you feel in the body. It's just not possible for you to think something and not have a feeling associated with it, or it's very rare, rather. Now, the thing with emotion, feeling, emotion is energy in motion, okay? And energy, as Einstein once said, cannot be destroyed or created. It only changes form. So let's say you're going through your life and you feel like you might be living a lie at times and you're posturing to the world and portraying a certain image, but underneath it, you feel very differently, whether you feel like a failure, whether you feel like a fraud, whether you feel insecure, whatever it is, all of that is going to create heaviness within you. That heaviness could be anger, it could be sadness, it could be um, uh, apathy, guilt. There's all sorts of things, all these like symptoms of depression, right? It's going to create certain feelings in you, and you might, for a moment, have fleeting moments of happiness, but they're never really going to land. And the reason why they're never going to land is because until you give yourself permission to feel and release the heaviness, you can never fully embrace the lightness, right? Your emotions are not a design flaw. Sadness, guilt, they're all there to teach you something should you choose to turn your attention inwards and learn the lesson. And until you do, you can't say, hey, do you know what? I'm just going to feel a little bit of joy. I'm just going to feel happiness. I'm going to ignore the sadness, not going to feel that one over there. It's just not possible. For example, when I was a few months ago, I was feeling heavy, just heaviness in my chest for a while, for a few weeks. There was something there that I wasn't allowing myself to express. And during that time frame, I was also wondering why is my life not really landing for me right now? I mean, I've got everything I've ever wanted. I'm living in an amazing lifestyle, doing amazing work in the world. I remember being studying Alpha Reset, thinking, why are these amazing breakthroughs not landing with me as much as they used to? And the reason for that was because I was holding on to sadness. And the same reflex that is involved in sobbing and crying is the same one that's involved in laughing and joy. Okay. So you've got to be able to release the heaviness to embrace the lightness. So the first step in peace is to detach, become aware of the story, detach. The second step is to release. And just one more point on release. The thing is, guys, it's impossible for you to lie to yourself. We like to think that we can, but the reality is you can lie to your head, but you can never lie to your heart. You know, at a deep level when you are lying to yourself, you just feel it. So you might try and pretend like you can go about your life and as though you don't feel certain things or you don't think certain things or you don't want certain things to change. Well, the reality is you can't lie to yourself. Therefore, it's so important to be able to become aware of the stories and release them. And from the release, you can then enter remember. And you can begin to remember who you really are. And at that point, then reinforce it. And remembering who you really are may sound a bit woo-woo. I don't know. But if you're listening to this podcast, and I imagine there is contrast in your life right now. There's a difference between how you're operating right now and maybe even how you see yourself right now and how you wish to operate and how you see yourself. That's contrast. Therefore, you do have a vision of who you are. You have had moments in your life when life has felt easy, or my bet is you've had moments in your life where life felt easy, it flowed, it was effortless, kind of like you had the Midas touch, right? So it's about remembering who you are and then reinforcing it. Like I said, the best way that we have come up with to do this is at the Alpha Reset. This is what some people try and go to therapy for. It's what some people spend a lifetime never really realizing about themselves. They don't have this foundation of peace or the process to achieve it. Now, once you've achieved peace, right, you've detached, released, remembered, reinforced, you've let some of that stagnant, heavy emotion go and you're embracing a little bit more lightness, you can then transition into power. And in power, you've got the 4 tenets of power, okay? And they are accept, choose, decide, and commit. So what accept basically is I take radical responsibility for my life. It's accepting the fact that you are 100% responsible for everything in your life. You have created everything in your life consciously or unconsciously. Now, I get it. Sometimes random occurrences happen that are completely out of your control. At the same time, I wonder if we were to lean into those, what part you may have played in it, or your interpretation in it, or your feelings within it. So, anyway, accept. I take radical responsibility for my life. Choose. I ask myself empowering questions. Decide. I make a decision based on what feels right. It's all about being in tune with your instinct, and then commit. I am committed but unattached. Okay, that means flexibility. Whatever is rigid is weak. There are points of failure in rigidity. Whatever is rigid breaks, whereas whatever is flexible bends. I know at times in my life when I'm the most stressed, it's often when I'm also the most rigid. It's often when I'm not following this process because I'm not tuning into my instinct. I'm feeling called to do something, but I'm denying it. I'm procrastinating on it, right? Or maybe I'm abdicating my responsibility and also not asking myself good questions. So just to kind of go back to the top, right? There's childhood trauma showing up in the relationship, creating distance, partly because of the distance you experience within yourself. You want to be able to remove that. Obviously, you've got peace and moving through that process with the alpha reset very quickly. This is why, as also, once the guys have gone through the activation method, which gives them a really powerful framework, incorporates some of this, gives them a very powerful framework to then reconnect with the wife. Their next step usually is the alpha reset, to dig deeper and really get to the root of what's been going on and get rid of it forever. And that root usually not just is in the marriage, it goes across their entire life. Anyway, so you've got peace. Once you've done peace, you start to feel better. You then put the ball back in your court by using power. You accept, choose, decide, commit. And from by that point, you've come to the end of it. You are actually able to, you've got clarity. You're able to make a decision on something. So then it comes down to the action plan, right? So plan, do, routines, review. And that is what forms the flow framework. Okay. So we talk a lot in the movement and in the activation method about the keystone habits, knowing your outcomes and your keystone habits. So that's part of the plan. And then obviously the do is putting that keystone habit into your actual schedule. Then the routine, this is where we give the men things like the alpha rise and shine, alpha decompression. Then the review, that's why we use the businessman's chart of intentional living, the coil, and the weekly reviews and the monthly reviews, so they can take the insight, stack the wins, hit singles. They can then take the insights, the lessons, and apply those with the improvements. So I love the saying, when you squeeze an orange juice, what do you get? Sorry, when you squeeze an orange, what do you get? Orange juice. Why? Because what comes out is what is on the inside. Now let's apply that to you. When you get squeezed in life, in business, in marriage, typically what is going to come out is going to be what is on the inside. Therefore, you get to, if you agree with that, then you get to look at and consider, well, what is on the inside of me? What was I caught in the crossfire of growing up? What have I learned about what it means to be a man, a father, a husband, an entrepreneur? How hard do I have to try every day to actually just be me? Or how easy and effortless is it? Now, if you do experience it has been tough, you do rely on perseverance, you rely on discipline. Here's the thing with discipline, right? When you stop being pushed by pain and you allow yourself to be pulled by pleasure and purpose, discipline is just a natural byproduct because it's harder for you to not do the things you want to do because it's who you are. It's harder to not operate in a certain way than it is to just resist it. It's harder to resist it. It's harder to not work out when you see yourself as someone who is fit and healthy. It's harder to resist it. It's harder to deal with the guilt of feeling lazy than it is to surrender and do what you know you must do because it's who you are, right? And a big part of that comes from being pulled by pleasure, in my opinion. And when you allow yourself to do that, discipline becomes the natural byproduct versus the pathway. Perseverance isn't needed so much because it's undeniable. You're working in alignment with who you are as a man, as a father, as an entrepreneur. So if this is resonating with you, my advice, if right now you're listening to this and there's a fire within your marriage you're desperate to put out, speak to one of the advisors. Speak to somebody on the team about the activation method. Look, if you don't speak to somebody on the team, that's fine. Just do something. Because I've just shared a framework with you that in my experience of working with thousands of men, this model has been developed by working with thousands of men and looking at my own experience and the experience of the people on the team. And any problem that you have, and we did this with Inner Circle guys the other day, we ran various problems through this. Any problem that you are dealing with, if you actually apply this framework, you establish peace. So you figure out what's going on for you, detach. You're able to release it. There's different tools that we give the men in the movement to do that. Like I said, we start with the alpha reset, but you detach, release, remember, reinforce. You start to feel better. You have lightness. You then move into power. You cycle through those 4 statements, those 4 tenets, and you enter into the flow framework. Any problem that you're dealing with, if you run it through this, you will go through from a place of confusion to a place of clarity, a place of procrastination to a place of action. I've seen it time and time again. So whatever you do from here on out, whether you choose to speak with one of the advisors or not, it's your choice. But I've shared something with you here that is undeniable. I've seen it work with thousands. I've seen it in action. So whether you use this or not, the point is, moving forwards, you're not going to be able to unsee or unhear what I've just shared with you. And oftentimes guys feel worse when they've been shared an insight and they don't take action. Hence why Dougie Fresh says, the moment of insight, take massive action. So I hope you found this helpful, men, and have a fantastic day. I'm going on holiday today, which I'm very excited about. Heading off to safari in Seychelles with the amazing and beautiful Amelia, my partner. Dougie Fresh is at the Alpha Reset, and he's heading out to be with his family as well for a week. So anyway, if you have any questions on this, by all means, go into the Facebook group, leave a comment. And again, thank you for joining us for another episode of The Powerful Man Show.
All right, guys, that's a wrap for this episode. But as I always say, in the moment of insight, take massive action. You see, there are 2 types of men that listen to a podcast like this. Those that go on from one podcast or show to another, just hoping things are going to change and realizing that they're going to be in the same place month after month, year after year. You see, I was this guy, so I completely get it. You may just not be ready. But there's also a second man that listens to a show just like this. And this is a guy who takes massive action so they can shorten the learning curve, compress time, and get results to be the wolf. See, wolf is an acronym for wise, open, loving, and fierce. Now, ask yourself, which one am I? And just be honest with yourself there. And there's no judgment on my end, but if you're ready to move from deactivated deer mode, which is defend, excuse, explain, react, to activated wolf, wise, open, loving, and fierce, then go over to thepowerfulman.com/grow and go there now. In fact, I'll make it super easy for you. I will even put the link right in the description here, so you can just click it and go over there now to learn more. Guys, in the moment of insight, take massive action. Go from deactivated to activated, because like I said, life is too short for average. And I'll see you on the next episode.